Welcome once again to Detective Duo, a home for timeless voices and enduring mysteries, from the sharp eyes of Tommy and Tuppence to the hidden corners of England's past. Subscribe if you enjoy these mysteries, and let us know where you're listening from today. Tuppence Beresford always maintained that a household morning ought to behave itself. Breakfast was meant to be a civilised affair. Eggs soft, toast crisp, coffee hot, and the world outside politely waiting its turn. So when the morning newspaper misbehaved, she took it personally. It began with a faint papery sigh, a whisper of something slipping where it shouldn't. Tuppence, halfway through buttering toast, paused. "Tommy," she said, "your newspaper is shedding." Tommy looked up from the crossword he had been studying with impressive laziness. Newspapers do that old thing, part of their charm. Not like this. She reached across the table, lifted the folded Times, and watched a thin slip of cream-coloured paper drift to the table like a falling feather. It landed squarely between the sugar bowl and the marmalade jar. Tuppence stared at it with the mild horror of someone discovering a spider in her shoe. "That didn't come from the paper." Tommy leaned forward. "Perhaps a love note from an admirer." "Oh yes," she said dryly, "because my secret admirers are well known for hiding messages in other people's newspapers." She unfolded the slip. The moment she read the words, the room seemed to exhale a cold breath. The Pact is awakening. 25 years is not long enough. No signature, no date, nothing but that strange, deliberate scrawl, neat, angular, and hauntingly familiar. Tommy whistled. "Goodness, sounds like the beginning of those silly thrillers people read on trains." "It isn't silly," Tuppence said quietly. Her voice had lost its bantering edge. "It's a warning of some kind. Or a threat." Tommy raised an eyebrow. "Or a particularly creative advertisement for patent medicine." "Tommy, don't." She tapped the corner of the note with her fingernail. "This feels like something from the war." He sobered quickly. For the Beresfords, the war was not simply a memory. It was a catalogue of shadows, secrets, codes, betrayals, and the kind of danger that never truly left one's bones. "You recognize the phrasing?" Tommy asked. "Not exactly," she admitted. "But the tone, the confidence of it, the theatricality, it reminds me of messages used by some of the more dramatic factions, groups that fancied themselves revolutionaries." "Or resurrectionists," Tommy murmured, scanning the note again. "Awakening, indeed." For a moment, neither spoke. Their cosy Chelsea dining room, usually bright with morning chatter and clinking teacups, suddenly felt smaller, quieter. The mantel clock ticked with unnecessary sharpness. Tuppence sat back. "Where on earth did you get the paper?" "I didn't," Tommy said. "It was already on the mat when I picked up the post." Tuppence frowned. "But we cancelled our subscription last month." "Yes, which makes this more interesting." She glanced instinctively toward the window, half expecting to see a lurking observer. The street below was ordinary as ever, a pram being pushed, a grocer unloading crates, a milk bottle tipped over by a stray cat. Nothing sinister, but the tension in her shoulders remained. "Tommy," she said softly, "this isn't a coincidence." "A prank, then?" "It doesn't feel like a prank. Pranks usually involve lard on doorknobs or frogs in beds, not cryptic warnings about pacts." Tommy was about to reply when the telephone rang. They both jumped. The bell's shrillness pierced the fragile quiet, jangling nerves that hadn't been touched in years. Tommy rose to answer it, but Tuppence stopped him. "Let me." She crossed the room, lifted the receiver and steadied her voice. "Beresford residence." A breath, soft, tremulous, answered her. "Tuppence." The voice was faint, strained. It's Honoré." Tuppence straightened, shooting a glance at Tommy. He moved closer, listening. "Honoré? What's happened? Are you all right?" A small hitching breath. "Did you receive anything odd in the newsprint?" Tommy and Tuppence exchanged a sharp look. "Yes," Tuppence said. "A note. What does it mean?" But the line crackled. Honoré whispered something unintelligible, fear curling each syllable. "Honoré? Honoré, listen to me." The line went dead. Tuppence held the receiver a moment longer, listening to the hollow buzz, then placed it back with careful precision. She hung up. Tommy folded his arms. Honoré St. Clair doesn't frighten easily. No, she doesn't. Tuppence returned to the table, staring at the fallen note. That's what scares me. He nodded slowly. We'll check on her. Today. Tomorrow morning, Tuppence corrected. If she's in trouble, barreling in without thought may make things worse. Our usual method, in other words, Tommy said dryly. Exactly. She allowed herself a thin smile. She picked up the note again. This handwriting. I've seen something like it. During a briefing in 40, perhaps, when we were dealing with infiltration groups. Some of those secret cells used dramatic phrasing to disguise instructions. Tommy leaned back in his chair. You think this has to do with those old fascist remnants? Tuppence hesitated. I don't know, but the word pact, it's too formal, too deliberate, too ceremonious. The sort of word used by people who take themselves very seriously, Tommy offered. Quite. She folded the note neatly, aligning the edges, though her fingers trembled. 25 years, she murmured. What happened 25 years ago that someone might hold a grudge long enough to send this? Tommy was silent for a moment. If it is connected to Honoré, then perhaps something she did, or something she uncovered. Her intelligence work was mostly classified, Tuppence said, but she always hinted at unfinished business. Not very reassuring, Tommy said. Nothing about Honoré ever was. She stood and began clearing plates, a task she performed with unnecessary vigour. Tommy joined her, though neither was truly thinking about crockery. Every clink of china felt like punctuation on a thought they dared not speak aloud. Finally, Tommy said, We'll go to Hampstead tomorrow. She'll tell us what's going on. If she can, Tuppence replied. If she hasn't, now, Tommy said gently. Let's not jump to murder before luncheon. Tuppence sighed. I'm not jumping. I'm anticipating. Which, in your case, is often indistinguishable. Despite everything, she laughed, but the unease did not lift. When she set the last plate down, she found her eyes drifting again to the note on the table. It lay there obediently, harmlessly, like something that had no right at all to unsettle an entire household. Tommy, she said suddenly, this is only the beginning. He nodded. I fear you're right. The mantel clock chimed the hour, too loudly, too brightly, as though it knew secrets and was impatient to see them unfold. Tuppence refilled her coffee, though she scarcely touched it. Her mind raced ahead to possibilities, coded messages, resurfacing enemies, buried alliances. Honoré, with her elegant composure and sharp, haunted eyes, flashed in her thoughts like a distant lighthouse. Do you think she'll be there when we arrive? She asked. Yes, Tommy said firmly. Honoré's many things, but she isn't the type to vanish without leaving a trail. You sound confident. I'm pretending, he admitted, but convincingly, I hope. She smiled faintly, convincingly enough. They returned to their seats, staring at the newspaper as though it might shed its secrets with enough scrutiny. The slip of paper lay beside it, silent, patient, dangerous in its simplicity. Tuppence said, Tommy, what if the pact never dissolved? His expression darkened. Then, my dear, we may have just stumbled into something that should have remained buried. Tuppence folded her hands. Her voice, when she spoke, was quiet but steady. Tomorrow, she said. We start with Honoré. And though the morning sun streamed politely through their windows, the warmth of it no longer reassured her. Something old had stirred, something that had waited 25 years to whisper again, something that would not wait much longer. If there was one thing Tuppence Beresford trusted as much as her own instincts, it was the unmistakable character of a front door. They spoke, doors did, some with the stately creak of age, others with the bright chatter of new hinges. But Honoré St. Clair's door said nothing at all when Tuppence pressed the bell and waited. Its silence was too polished, too composed, like a polite hostess refusing to answer, even though she was unmistakably at home. Tommy stepped back to survey the facade of the Hampstead townhouse. No curtains drawn, milk bottles gone, post taken in, looks ordinary enough. That's the trouble, Tuppence replied. It's trying too hard. She pressed the bell again. Still nothing. Tommy rapped lightly, then more firmly. The door yielded under the pressure, unlocked. Tuppence's eyes flashed. Tommy, she always bolts her door, even when expecting us. Perhaps she forgot. Honoré? Forget? Tuppence sniffed. The woman labels her spice jars in Latin. With no further hesitation, they stepped inside. The entrance hall greeted them with the unnerving neatness of a room that had been recently used and rapidly abandoned. A faint trace of Honoré's favourite lavender polish lingered, but beneath it lay something colder, a sharp, acrid hint of tobacco. "Tobacco," Tuppence murmured. She never smoked. Tommy followed her gaze to a small porcelain dish on a side table. Inside it, a pinch of fresh ash. "Someone did." They exchanged a look. The drawing room was perfectly arranged, too perfectly. Cushions plumped, books aligned. A single teacup stood on the tray beside the fireside chair, washed but still glistening with droplets. Someone had cleaned in a hurry, not well enough. Tuppence touched the rim. Still damp. "So she was here recently," Tommy said. "Very recently. And someone else was with her." Her expression sharpened. "Look." On the sofa, one cushion sat slightly askew, not uncomfortably, but with the unmistakable impression of someone having risen suddenly. She lifted it, examining the slight indentation underneath. Warmth still clung faintly to the fabric. She straightened. "This house has been empty for no more than an hour." They moved toward the writing desk near the window. A book lay face down, its spine protesting gently. Tuppence picked it up. "The Blackshirts of Britain," she read aloud. "A charming bedtime story." Tommy frowned. Honoré never left books lying open. You practically need a ceremonial blessing to interrupt her reading. Tuppence flipped it over and examined the inside cover. "This isn't her usual copy. This one's older, more academic." She held up the edge. A page corner bore a dark smudge, ink, a deliberate mark. Before she could examine it further, Tommy called softly from the hall. "Tuppence, come look at this." She joined him and saw what he pointed to, a crumpled scrap of paper beside the umbrella stand. It was folded neatly once, then crushed in a moment of haste. Tuppence retrieved it carefully and smoothed it out. One word stared back at them. "Tonight." A shiver skated down her spine. "That's the timetable," she whispered. "Whatever the pact is, whatever they want, tonight is when it begins." Tommy's voice was low. "Or when it ends." Their solemn moment was interrupted by a sudden voice behind them. "Oh, goodness, you frightened me." They turned to face Mrs. Cardew, Honoré's next-door neighbour, who peered in through the half-open door like a sparrow inspecting its nest. She clutched her shopping bag as though expecting it to fly away. "Mrs. Beresford, isn't it?" she said. "And Mr. B, I thought I saw you arrive." Tuppence offered a polite nod. "Forgive us, Mrs. Cardew, but have you seen Honoré today?" "Oh, yes," the neighbour replied, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "Well, yes and no. She left about an hour ago. Terribly rushed. Didn't even look my way when I wished her good morning." Tuppence leaned in. "Was she alone?" "No." Mrs. Cardew's expression shifted. "There was a man. Stern-looking. Grey overcoat. He walked just behind her, as though guiding her." She whispered the last words with relish. Tommy frowned. "Did they leave in a car?" "No car. They walked down the pavement toward the high street, quite briskly. No suitcase either, which is extremely odd for Miss St. Clair. She never goes anywhere without packing 3 scarves at least." "That's true," Tuppence murmured. Mrs. Cardew sniffed. She looked pale too, as if she hadn't slept. "I do hope she's all right." The sentiment was genuine, though her curiosity thrummed louder. "We hope so too," Tuppence said warmly. "Thank you." Mrs. Cardew nodded, already preparing to recount the moment to someone else, and scurried off. When she was gone, the silence settled again, an unwelcome companion. Tuppence returned to the drawing-room, examining every detail. Honoré's absence wasn't accidental. She sensed something more, fear or urgency, or both. "She left with him willingly," she murmured, "but not comfortably." Tommy looked around, and she didn't take anything with her. No bag, no coat. She left in haste, but not of her own design. Tuppence sat in the fireside chair, trying to read the room the way Honoré might have left it. Subtly, deliberately, clues hidden in plain sight. Her eyes returned to the book. She opened it again. On the margin of a chapter about splinter factions, an ink smudge curved into a familiar shape, almost like a ring seal, a gauntlet holding a torch. Her breath caught. "Tommy, this," she pointed. "This is a clandestine insignia. From the war, one of those uncomfortably ambitious extremist groups." Tommy stooped to look closer. "You're certain?" "As certain as I was when we first received that note," her voice dropped. "The Pact isn't just a poetic name. It's a faction, a group, something that once believed itself bound by oath." Tommy scratched his chin thoughtfully. If Honoré knew anything about them, it could explain why she's been taken, or why she fled. Tuppence's gaze swept the room once more. But she left clues, subtle clues. She wanted someone to find them. "Us?" Tommy asked. "Who else?" Tuppence murmured. She stood abruptly. "We need answers. Proper answers. And if Honoré was mixed up with a wartime faction, there's only one person who might know what she never told us." Tommy nodded. "Dr. Lionel Herrick." "Yes, the historian who lectured on the Blackshirts movement during the war. Honoré never admitted it, but I'm certain she worked with him." "Then we pay him a visit." Tuppence turned toward the door, her resolve sharpening. "We will, but not before we search this house thoroughly once more." Tommy smiled faintly. "Inspector Tuppence takes the lead." "Oh, hush," she said. "Just because I'm right doesn't mean I need commentary." And they searched the rest of the house. Bedrooms immaculate, wardrobe open but unrifled, kitchen spotless. No signs of struggle, no messages. Only the growing sense that someone had left in a hurry while trying to pretend otherwise. When they finally stepped outside, locking the door behind them, Tuppence breathed in the brisk midday air with a mixture of frustration and fear. "She wanted us to come," Tuppence said. "She wanted us to find that word. Tonight." Tommy placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Then we'll be ready for tonight, whatever it is." She nodded once, firmly, but as they walked down the quiet Hampstead Road, Tuppence couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that they were already one step behind, that Honoré's silence wasn't merely absence, it was a warning. The first thing Tuppence noticed in the British Museum archives was the sound, a faint metallic hum, as though the past itself vibrated restlessly behind the stacks. The second thing she noticed was Dr. Lionel Herrick waving at them from behind a barricade of papers, his spectacles gleaming like twin lanterns in the dim glow of the reading lamps. "Beresfords," he exclaimed, his voice carrying far too enthusiastically through the solemn archive hall. "Come, come, I've cleared a table for you. Well, cleared is an exaggeration. I've shoved things to one side." Tommy grinned. "Same as your lectures, then?" Herrick chuckled, entirely unoffended. "Exactly so. Sit, sit." They joined him at a long wooden table ringed by shelves that seemed to lean in, eager to listen. Old documents, surveillance files, pre-war pamphlets, and leather-bound journals were stacked in precarious towers. Tuppence inhaled the smell of paper, dry, chalky, and touched with the faint pepperiness of age. "Now," Herrick said, rubbing his hands, "you mentioned an insignia in your message, a gauntlet holding a torch." Tuppence slid the marked photograph corner, the smudged torch emblem, across the table. Herrick took one look and went very still. "Oh dear," he murmured. "Oh dear indeed." Tommy leaned forward. "That recognizable?" "More than recognizable," Herrick said quietly. "This, my friends, is the sigil of a particularly unpleasant splinter faction, a breakaway from Mosley's Blackshirts in 1940, radical, secretive, cult-like. They called themselves the Torchbearers." "Charming," Tuppence said dryly. Herrick nodded. They were disbanded, or believed to be disbanded, after a disastrous attempted gathering in late 1940. Many were arrested, but the core group escaped, and before they vanished they established a pact, an oath really. When Britain grows complacent, our flame returns. Tuppence felt a chill, not of temperature but recognition. "That sounds very much like the message we received." Herrick's expression softened into something grave. "I feared as much." He reached into a drawer and produced an old folder tied with frayed ribbon. "There's something else, something you likely don't know about Honoré St. Clair." Tommy and Tuppence exchanged a quick glance. Herrick untied the ribbon and opened the folder to reveal a series of blurred photographs, handwritten reports, and a passport bearing a younger Honoré, her expression sharp and tense, her eyes carrying secrets. "She infiltrated them," Herrick said, "the torchbearers. She went undercover for months, vanished from all official records. When she returned, the group collapsed. Tuppence frowned. Collapsed? Or was it dismantled because of information she provided? Herrick hesitated. Both, perhaps, but someone blamed her, or many someones. That was 25 years ago, Tommy said. Why now? Herrick tapped the folder. Because their guiding principle was patience. They fancied themselves phoenixes. When Britain became complacent, they would rise. And Britain is, how shall I put it, decidedly complacent these days. Tuppence straightened. Honoré must have sensed something. She called us before she disappeared. Herrick nodded. She would know the signs of movement. These groups don't simply dissolve, they lie dormant, waiting. Tommy exhaled. Wonderful. So we're chasing an enemy that's been asleep for decades. Not asleep, Herrick corrected. Coiled. He stood abruptly, surprising them both with the energy of the motion. Let me show you something. They followed him deeper into the archives, walking between towering shelves that cast thick shadows. The air smelled heavier here, ink, glue and dust settling like old secrets. Herrick stopped before a cabinet marked Surveillance 1938-1945. He selected 3 maps, each yellowed and brittle. These, he said, spreading them across a nearby table, are records of torchbearer activity, meeting points, buildings they used, places they were observed lingering around. 3 areas were circled in red: Holloway, Richmond, Shoreditch. Tuppence felt a flicker of recognition. These match areas mentioned in modern extremist whisperings. She bent over the maps, scanning the handwritten annotations, but something caught her eye, a note scrawled in hurried pencil across the margin of the Holloway map. You never finished the job. Her breath stopped. That isn't your handwriting, Tommy said quickly. Indeed not, Herrick replied, alarmed. Nor was it here the last time I opened this drawer. Tuppence looked sharply at him. Meaning someone else accessed this map recently. And left us a message, Tommy added. Herrick's face tightened. This is troubling. Very troubling. Tuppence studied the handwriting. It was angular and sharp, eerily similar to the note they had received in their newspaper. This isn't random vandalism. Someone wanted us to find this. Tommy leaned closer to the map. Someone who knows we're involved. Someone confident. Herrick lowered his voice. This archive is not easy to access. Whoever left that note has connections, or keys. Tuppence felt the walls closing in. Or perhaps it was simply the oppressive stillness of the archive room, the shelves seeming to crowd closer. They're watching, she whispered. Herrick swallowed. I fear so. A moment passed in tense silence before Tommy spoke. Herrick, who would have known about Honoré's involvement back then? Very few people, he said. Her handler, a couple of high-ranking intelligence officers, and of course the torchbearers themselves. Tuppence clenched her jaw. Someone from that group survived. Someone still holds her responsible. Herrick nodded solemnly. And someone wants to revive the Pact. Tommy stepped back, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Well, we always did complain about boredom. Tommy, Tuppence said sharply. He raised his hands, trying to lighten the mood. It's not lightenable. Herrick closed the folder with a decisive snap. You must be cautious. If Honoré has been taken or coerced, she may be forced to reveal what she once concealed. Which is? Tommy asked. Information about the core leaders who escaped arrest, their identities, their hiding places, their plans. Herrick paused. She may also know the location of their archive. Tuppence's eyebrows rose. Archive, Herrick nodded. Every secret society fancies itself terribly important. They keep records, oaths, names, rituals. His smile was humorless. Egotism disguised as ideology. Tuppence drew a slow breath. If Honoré knows where this archive is, she's in far more danger than we realized. Herrick softened. I'm sorry. I know she's a friend. Yes, Tuppence said quietly. A difficult, complicated friend. The best kind. Tommy placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. Before they could speak again, a museum attendant approached, a young man in a tidy vest, his expression faintly troubled. Dr. Herrick? He asked. Apologies for interrupting. Herrick blinked his owl-like blink. Yes? There was a gentleman here earlier, the attendant said. Tall grey coat, rather stern. He asked specifically for Mr. and Mrs. Beresford. Tuppence felt her heartbeat kick. What did he want? He didn't say, the attendant replied. He simply left a message, told me I must pass it on. Tommy's voice was low. What message? The attendant hesitated, as though repeating the words might violate some quiet museum code. He said, the attendant recited softly, tell the Beresfords the Pact never forgets its oaths. For a moment, the air itself seemed to contract. Tuppence steadied her breathing. He knew we were here. Tommy's jaw tightened, which means he's tracking us. Herrick rubbed at his temples, aghast. The situation is escalating. Yes, Tuppence murmured. And now we know something else. She lifted her chin, eyes sharp. Honoré didn't disappear by chance. She was taken by someone who believes the Pact is rising again. Tommy squared his shoulders. Then the real investigation begins. Today. Tuppence nodded. And whoever this man in the grey coat is, he wants us to know he's watching. Herrick's voice trembled around the edges. Beresfords, please be cautious. We always are, Tommy said lightly. Tuppence gave him a look. Well, Tommy corrected himself, we try. Tuppence gathered the marked photograph, the map, and the old folder. Come along, Tommy, we have 3 locations to investigate. Holloway, Richmond, and Shoreditch. Tommy offered Herrick a firm handshake. Thank you, truly. Herrick watched them go with a worried crease in his brow. As Tommy and Tuppence stepped out of the archive into the brighter corridor, Tuppence spoke softly but with absolute certainty. He said the Pact never forgets its oaths. Well, neither do we. Their footsteps echoed into the distance, carrying them toward a danger older than they had ever imagined, and far from finished. The first sound in the abandoned Shoreditch textile factory was not the groan of old beams or the whistle of a draft. It was Tuppence's crisp declaration. I don't like buildings that pretend to be dead. They always have a pulse somewhere, and it's usually in the wrong place. Tommy switched on his torch. Charming thought. It's not a thought, she replied, stepping over a fallen spool of thread. It's a warning. The beam of the torch carved a thin path through the dust-thick gloom. The old factory stretched out before them in a forlorn sprawl of rusted machines, drooping belts, shattered windows, and lint drifting in the air like pale ghosts. The wooden floorboards groaned beneath their feet, complaining about the intrusion. This was one of their meeting points, Tommy asked. According to Herrick's maps, Tuppence said, though it looks more suited to haunting than plotting. Tommy pointed his torch upward, illuminating a series of catwalks suspended overhead. Plenty of hiding spots. Don't say that as if it's a positive feature, she murmured. They pressed on. Through the debris, the machinery resembled silent beasts, hulking, skeletal, asleep but not harmless. The atmosphere wasn't simply abandoned, it was expectant. Tuppence paused suddenly and crouched. Look. In a patch of dust, partially lit by a broken skylight, were footprints, fresh ones. Heavy tread, the pattern still crisp. Someone's been here within hours, she whispered. Tommy knelt beside her. 2 sets, he murmured, tracing the outline. One heavier, one lighter. The lighter could be Honoré, Tuppence finished. Her breath hitched. Then she's alive, and very close to this place. Tommy straightened. Let's stay sharp. I'm always sharp, she said. You're the one who wanders into trouble like a schoolboy chasing marbles. Before Tommy could protest, Tuppence held up her hand. There, on the ground, a candle stub. It rested beside an overturned crate. The wax still glistened. She touched it lightly. Soft, recently burned. They exchanged a look. Honoré had been here, or someone who wanted them to think she had. They ventured deeper, weaving between leaning looms covered in grey dust. The floor creaked ominously beneath their steps. The air grew colder, and the strange quiet pressed in more tightly. Tommy, Tuppence said suddenly, pointing at a far wall. Do you see that? The torch revealed chalk scrawls, crude, fervent strokes. Spirit of 39, the flame endures. Someone's been rehearsing slogans, Tommy muttered, hoping to stir up nostalgia, perhaps. Or fanaticism, Tuppence replied darkly. They moved along the wall. A third message stopped them cold. HSC Tuppence's throat tightened. Honoré St. Clair. Tommy leaned closer. Is it a message she left for us? Or one left for her? Tuppence's voice trembled despite her effort to steady it. Either way, she was here. She reached out and touched the chalk lightly, as if hoping to feel some residual warmth of Honoré's presence. But the chalk was cold and brittle. Before she could speak again, a sudden rustling echoed through the rafters. Both froze. Tommy swung the torch upward. A figure stood on the metal catwalk above, tall, unmoving, half-silhouetted. His grey overcoat hung like a shadow made solid. His face was obscured, but the posture, rigid, watching, was unmistakable. Tuppence's breath left her in a quiet gasp. The man in the grey coat. The figure didn't flee immediately. He observed them, as though measuring their progress. Then, with a fluid motion, he slipped behind a row of rusted machinery and vanished. "After him!" Tommy barked. They sprinted, Tuppence surprisingly fleet despite muttering about the impracticality of polished shoes. They darted between machines, climbed a short ladder, and reached the catwalk. Empty. They followed the walkway to the far end, where a metal door hung off its hinges. A cold wind stirred the loose bolts. No footsteps, no coat fluttering around a corner. "He's gone," Tuppence panted. "He moves like smoke." Tommy surveyed the space. No drops of dust disturbed except where he stood. He wanted us to see him. "A warning," she said quietly. Tommy exhaled. Or an invitation. When they returned to the factory floor, Tuppence slowed near a collapsed loom. Something glinted beneath it. She knelt and retrieved a torn slip of paper from the lint and debris. "Tommy," she whispered, "you'd best look at this." He joined her. It was half of a photograph. Honoré sat in the centre, recognizably younger, her posture alert, her gaze wary. Flanking her were two men. One face was visible, a stranger with sharp cheekbones and an expression of quiet menace. The other male figure had been torn away deliberately, but the remaining sliver of a shoulder, the angle of posture. "The grey-coated man," Tommy murmured. Tuppence swallowed hard. "This isn't just proof Honoré was here. It's proof she's been with them before, and recently." She tucked the fragment safely away. "We need to search the rest." The further they ventured, the clearer it became that this place had been used, recently and repeatedly. A makeshift table of crates held scraps of coded messages, burnt edges of paper, and a booklet, water-stained but still legible. Tommy opened it. A pamphlet. Tuppence peered over his shoulder. "Those aren't ordinary meeting notes. Look at the structure. Letter substitution cipher." Tommy arched a brow. Comforting to know fanatics remain traditional. Tuppence took the pamphlet and slipped it into her bag. "We'll work on the cipher after we leave. I doubt they intended to leave it for us, but I'm not complaining." She moved to another corner and lifted a box, sending a small avalanche of dust cascading down. "Tommy, look at this." She displayed a matchbook labelled with a barely legible address, something to do with a warehouse in Richmond. "Another meeting point," he nodded. "Matches Herrick's map." Tuppence tried to make light of it. "Well, if this were one of our lighter adventures, we'd now find a convenient signpost reading "Villains to the left." Tommy grinned. "I miss those days." They shared a smile, quick, strained, but real. Then, just as Tommy turned toward the exit, a sound broke the heavy quiet, a soft, metallic click. Not loud, not aggressive, but unmistakably purposeful. Tuppence whipped around, her torch beam slicing through shadows. "Tommy, what was that?" He scanned the room. "A latch? A trigger?" "A trap," she whispered. They stood very still. Then, from somewhere behind the walls of machinery, a panel shifted slightly. A rigged device, half rusted and crudely assembled, hung suspended by wire. It swung loosely, harmless now, but when Tommy tapped the mechanism, it clattered to the floor. "It's been disarmed," he said. "Someone beat us to it." "Or someone disarmed it for us." Tuppence's voice refused to steady. "To make a point." Tommy frowned. "A threat?" "A message. We could have hurt you. We didn't. Not yet." They left the factory with an oppressive weight pressing on their shoulders. Even the street outside, normally lively with lorries and shouting vendors, felt muted, as if the world understood they carried something dangerous with them. Tuppence clutched Tommy's arm. "We're being herded." "I know." "They want us to follow the clues." "I know." She looked up at him. "Are we actually going to?" Tommy sighed. I'm afraid so. Tuppence nodded. Good. I'd hate to think we were losing our touch. But her hand remained on his arm longer than usual. As they walked away from the factory, Tuppence glanced back once more. A faint shadow moved behind a broken window pane, vanishing before she could draw breath to warn Tommy. She said nothing. Some warnings were better carried quietly until the right moment. They had the photograph, the coded pamphlet, and the knowledge that Honoré was in the midst of people who believed they were heirs to a forgotten flame. As they walked toward the main road, Tuppence murmured, "This isn't a revival, it's a resurrection, and resurrections always come with ghosts." Tommy didn't argue, because the worst ghost of all was the one they had just glimpsed. A living man wrapped in grey. The waiter had barely finished setting down the third flickering candle when Tuppence leaned forward and said, with the solemnity of someone delivering a verdict, "If this place serves tinned consommé again, I shall personally report it to Parliament." Dr. Lionel Herrick gave a soft wheeze of laughter. "My dear Mrs. Beresford, no one would ever dare cross you in such a fashion." Tommy smiled over the rim of his wineglass. They'd need a death wish. The restaurant, La Petite Auberge off Dean Street, was modestly lit, its close-set tables arranged beneath framed sketches of performers long forgotten. Soft jazz from a corner radio mingled with the subdued clatter of cutlery. A warmth clung to the air, not just from the candles, but from the sense of shared purpose among the trio at their table. Herrick unfolded his napkin with exaggerated care. "Well then, you've brought me quite the problem, and I've been thinking compulsively since you telephoned." Tommy withdrew the coded pamphlet from his coat pocket and placed it between their plates like a grim dessert course. "We found this at the Shoreditch factory." Herrick adjusted his spectacles and frowned at the blocky symbols, the uneven script, the erratic spacing. Primitive cipher, substitution-based obviously, though the writer was clever about creating false linguistic patterns. Tuppence sipped her wine. "Herrick, darling, if you could translate into English, we'd adore you." He chuckled, then leaned closer. "I already did. On the cab ride here. Look." He pulled a folded sheet from his coat and smoothed it out. A list of dates appeared, neatly inked. Tommy scanned them. "Anniversaries?" Herrick nodded. "Yes. The dates correspond to specific rallies, clandestine meetings, and core events associated with the Torchbearer faction. The next date, 2 nights from now, marks the founding of the Pact." Tuppence nearly dropped her fork. "The founding?" Herrick gave a sombre hum. "Yes. The night they swore the flame would outlive their failures. The night Reginald Vale declared Britain had grown weak and needed rebirth." Tommy felt a ripple of unease. "So someone now wants to commemorate that founding?" "Not commemorate," Herrick said. "Revive. Symbolism is the fuel of such movements." Tuppence's gaze sharpened. "This isn't merely theatre, then. It's an orchestration." "Precisely." Before Herrick could continue, Tuppence's eyes flickered toward a man seated 2 tables away, a solitary diner with an untouched plate, pretending to read a menu he had held upside down for the last 5 minutes. His ear leaned just slightly toward their conversation. "Tommy," she murmured, without looking directly. Tommy's eyes followed hers, then returned to their table. He continued speaking casually, as though nothing were amiss. "Herrick, you said there was more we needed to know about Honoré." Herrick took a long drink of wine, steadying himself. Yes, there is." Tuppence noticed their eavesdropper lower the menu a fraction. She mentally noted his shoes, mud on the edges, expensive leather, recently resoled. The details were wrong for a Soho diner. Herrick continued, oblivious. "I didn't tell you earlier because, well, Honoré asked me never to reveal it unless the past found her again. And it has." Tuppence spoke softly. "We're listening." Herrick exhaled. Honoré wasn't merely an infiltrator. She became critical to the dismantling of the faction. She gained Vale's trust, dangerously so, and when MI5 moved in, Vale believed she had betrayed him personally. Tommy frowned. But she was doing her job. "For radicals," Herrick replied gently, "the line between duty and treachery is irrelevant. Betrayal is betrayal." Tuppence leaned back, processing this. Vale blamed her. "Deeply," Herrick said. "When he was arrested, he shouted her name as they dragged him away. I witnessed it myself. Tommy's stomach tightened. And now he's out. Herrick's expression clouded. Yes. The word hung between them like a cold draught. So, when was he released? Tuppence asked, her voice thin. Herrick wiped his spectacles. 6 months ago. Tuppence inhaled sharply. 6 months? Herrick, why didn't you— He disappeared immediately afterward, Herrick interjected. Didn't register a new address, didn't notify anyone. Rumour suggests he reconnected with surviving members. I didn't want to alarm Honoré without proof. Tuppence shook her head. That wasn't your choice to make. Herrick's shoulders sagged. I know. Meanwhile, the man pretending to read his menu rose abruptly and slipped outside. Tuppence's eyes flashed. Tommy. Tommy didn't hesitate. He got up, murmured, "Excuse me," and followed. Herrick looked bewildered. Did I say something? Not you, Tuppence replied. Someone else was listening. Herrick turned toward the door. Good heavens! Outside, Tommy stepped into the cool evening air just in time to hear the screech of tyres. A taxi shot away from the curb, its back window open for only a moment, long enough for Tommy to glimpse a familiar grey shoulder disappearing into the seat. He returned to the table 5 minutes later, empty-handed. Well? Tuppence asked. He got away, Tommy said, sliding back into his chair. But it was the same fellow, the grey coat. Tuppence folded her arms. They're following us openly now. How flattering. Herrick paled. This is escalating far more rapidly than I feared. That's because Honoré's involved, Tuppence said. They want something from her. Herrick nodded gravely. Yes, the Torchbearer faction believed Vale could unite them. He was charismatic, dangerously so. Honoré uncovered something about him, something vital. Tommy leaned in. What? Herrick hesitated. She found a ledger. Tuppence frowned. Ledger? A record, Herrick explained. Names of supporters, financial backers, locations of safe houses, the sort of document that could destroy anyone listed. Tommy's eyes widened. A blackmail treasure. Precisely. Honoré smuggled it out before Vale's arrest. She was ordered to give it to MI5, but it disappeared before it ever reached official custody. Vale never forgave her. So, he's hunting her for it, Tuppence asked. Or for revenge, Herrick whispered. If he believes the ledger still exists somewhere in her possession, he may think it holds the key to reuniting the Pact. Tuppence pressed her napkin to her lips. Honoré must be terrified. Or defiant, Tommy added. She's never been the surrendering sort. The waiter refilled their glasses unobtrusively, unaware of the gravity thickening the air. Tuppence's mind raced. Herrick, if the meeting is 2 nights from now, we don't have time to lose. No, he agreed. You must act quickly. The Shoreditch factory was a prelude. The next step will be more elaborate. Richmond, Tommy said, followed by Holloway. Herrick nodded weakly. And if Vale is behind this, he will not stop until one of 2 things happens. The Pact rises again, or Honoré pays. For a moment, the table fell silent except for the soft clinking of cutlery and muted restaurant chatter around them. Finally, Tuppence said, We're going after her, wherever this leads. Tommy reached for her hand beneath the table and squeezed it once. Herrick looked between them, admiration, worry and resignation mingling all at once. I thought the war was over, he whispered. Tommy gave a faint smile. So did we, yet somehow it seems determined to have a sequel. Dinner finished with a little appetite. When they stepped outside, the night air wrapped around them like a cool shawl. The street lamps cast modest halos over the cobbled pavement. A taxi idled near the curb, its driver dozing lightly. They approached it, but as Tommy reached for the door handle, he froze. Etched into the condensation on the window was a message, ragged, finger-written, urgent. Keep out of the Pact's rebirth. Tuppence inhaled sharply. He followed us here too. Tommy scanned the street, empty, quiet, watching. Herrick's face drained of colour. Good heavens! Tuppence touched the words lightly with her fingertips. The message smeared but remained legible enough to sting. Tommy, she said softly, they don't want us just frightened. They want us warned. Warnings from fanatics are never charitable, Tommy said. They're ultimatums. Tuppence stepped back. Which means we're closer than they want. Or further behind than we think, Herrick added bleakly. Tuppence straightened, voice firm. Either way, we move forward. Tommy nodded. To Richmond? Yes. And then to whoever thinks they can intimidate us with damp window scribbles. Herrick opened his mouth to protest, but Tuppence silenced him with a raised hand. We'll contact you tomorrow morning. Until then, go home, lock your doors, and if anything at all seems off, ring us immediately. Herrick swallowed hard. I will. The historian departed in a hurried shuffle, coat flapping behind him. Tuppence turned to Tommy, eyes glittering with resolve. Vale wants a rebirth? Then he's about to discover we're very competent midwives. Tommy blinked. That's a rather grim metaphor. I'm feeling grim, she admitted, and determined. Together they stepped into their taxi, leaving the message still faintly visible on the glass. Above them, somewhere in the labyrinth of Soho's narrow streets, a grey coat moved in silence, watching, waiting. And as the cab pulled into the night, Tuppence whispered the truth neither wanted to say aloud. This isn't about ideology anymore, Tommy. It's personal. Tuppence Beresford adjusted her binoculars with the exaggerated seriousness of a naturalist who had spent a lifetime studying obscure birds. If anyone asks, she said, we are here to observe the migratory behaviour of the lesser spotted, whatever it is, preferably something no one can identify. Tommy, settling beside her on the sloping bank, chuckled softly. You do realise that if we meet a real birdwatcher, they'll see through us instantly. That is why, she replied, opening her notebook with a flourish, we must look like enthusiastic amateurs. People forgive ignorance in amateurs. It's passion they distrust. Richmond Park lay stretched before them in a serene sprawl, open meadows, wandering deer, murmuring grasses. The early evening light cast a warm gold across the landscape. Yet beneath the calm, an uncanny tension hummed, as though the park itself held its breath. A coded pamphlet, now carefully deciphered, had pointed them to this place, this hour. Tommy lowered his voice. Do you see anything yet? Not yet, Tuppence murmured, but the coded times matched perfectly. Someone planned a meeting here, and if the Shoreditch factory taught us anything, it's that these people enjoy the cloak and dagger dramatics. A jogger passed by, earbuds in place, oblivious to history brewing around him. Tuppence sighed. Modern life has no sense of occasion. It was then she noticed movement. Subtle, scattered. Tommy, she whispered, nudging him. There. From between clusters of beech trees, individuals appeared one by one. They did not acknowledge each other openly, but their behaviour carried the unmistakable pattern of coordination. Some carried umbrellas for no discernible reason, others walked with exaggerated casualness. A man in a hat tapped his wristwatch 3 times. A woman in a scarf rubbed her ear in response. Signals, Tommy murmured. Crude but effective. Tuppence scanned the gathering. And the turnout isn't small. Within minutes a loose circle formed, a gathering hiding inside an ordinary park scene. People stood in clusters, their posture stiff, their eyes flicking about with practised vigilance. No laughter, no warmth, only expectancy. Then Tuppence tensed. She grabbed Tommy's sleeve. Grey coat, near the oak tree. Tommy followed her gaze. There he was. The man who had followed them at the archives, trailed them from Soho, watched them at the factory. His coat looked darker in the fading light, his face still obscured by the turned-up collar. He stood slightly apart from the circle, but there was no mistaking the authority in his stance. He's directing them, Tommy whispered. Or waiting, Tuppence murmured. For what, I wonder? They ducked lower on the slope, partially hidden behind ferns and a fallen branch. A central figure, a man wearing a simple black mask, stepped into the loose circle. His voice rose above the low chatter. We are gathered to renew the oath of 1940. The words sliced through the park's calm like a knife. Tuppence stiffened. Dear heavens, they are reviving it. Tommy scribbled notes quickly. Let's get as much as we can. Fragments of conversation drifted their way. Vale's return will restore us. The unfinished oath must be honoured. The woman must confess. Tuppence's grip on her notebook tightened. The woman. Honoré, Tommy said grimly. And us, Tuppence reminded him. They mentioned the meddling Beresfords at Shoreditch. But so far we are merry bird-watchers, Tommy said lightly. Observe the plumage of the extremist in its natural habitat. Tuppence elbowed him. Suddenly a ripple moved through the gathering, like wind through tall grass. Two men stepped forward, flanking a third figure. Tuppence stopped breathing. Honorée St. Clair. She was pale, ashen almost, but her spine was straight, her chin lifted in unwavering defiance. Her coat was rumpled, and her hands were bound loosely in front, though someone had tried to disguise the restraint by tucking them into her pockets. "Oh, Honorée," Tuppence whispered, her heart clenching. "What have they done to you?" Tommy reached for her hand. "She's alive. That's something." But Honorée's eyes, once sharp with irrepressible wit, now carried a weary vigilance. She glanced around the clearing as though memorizing faces, exits, possibilities. The masked speaker pointed at her. "You will reveal the truth concealed in 1940. Honorée said nothing. Her silence seemed to inflame them. A woman stepped forward, her voice sharp. "She betrayed us then. She betrayed Vale. She must answer." Honorée responded with a dry scoff, brave despite her trembling shoulders. "I don't owe you children a history lesson." The speaker snapped. "You owe the Pact your loyalty." "I owe the Pact nothing," Honorée shot back. "It dissolved the moment it tried to burn this country to the ground." The murmurs rose into a low growl. Tommy shifted uneasily. "We should do something." "No," Tuppence whispered fiercely. "Not yet. They're too many. We jeopardize her more by springing up like amateur rescuers." Tommy's jaw clenched, but he nodded. The masked leader raised his hand for silence. "Honorée," he said slowly, "you will speak. You will tell us who you informed. You will reveal where the ledger is." Honorée's chin rose another inch. "I will do nothing of the sort." "Then Vale will deal with you himself." A stir rippled through the gathering. Some seemed eager, others anxious. "Is Vale here?" Tommy whispered. "Possibly," Tuppence murmured. "Or perhaps they're invoking him to provoke her." From deep within the group, a voice hissed. "The Beresfords are meddling. They should be dealt with as well." Tommy whispered. "Oh good, we're on the program." "Shh," Tuppence said. "I want to hear that side conversation." But before she could tune in, chaos erupted. A man lunged toward the masked speaker, shouting about ideological betrayal. Another shoved him back. Someone cried that Vale's approach was too weak. Someone else insisted Honorée must be punished immediately. In seconds, the careful formation dissolved into fractured shouting. Arms flailed, shoulders collided, old grudges surfaced in snarls. "It's splintering," Tommy said. "Infighting." "Good," Tuppence murmured. "Fanatics never agree for long." Suddenly, a piercing sound sliced through the air. A police whistle. Distant. Faint, but unmistakable. Panic detonated through the gathering. Members scattered in every direction, some sprinting into the trees, others diving behind bushes or racing down the hill. "Typical," Tuppence muttered. "The police finally appear when we don't need them." But Tommy wasn't listening. "Honorée!" Amid the chaos, the grey-coated man seized Honorée's arm, dragging her swiftly away from the clearing. She stumbled but didn't resist. Perhaps she couldn't. "We must follow," Tommy said, already rising. Tuppence grabbed him, pulling him down. "No, look!" Two remaining group members sprinted back to snatch the coded pamphlet someone had dropped. One shouted, "The outsiders saw too much!" Tommy sank back into the ferns. "Right. Quiet bird watchers we remain." The grey-coated man guided Honorée toward the tree line. They disappeared into the shadows like a candle being snuffed out. Tommy and Tuppence rose only when the last straggler had fled. Tuppence's voice quivered with fury and fear. "They've taken her again. They're moving her somewhere else." Tommy placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "We'll find her." Tuppence looked out over the disturbed clearing, the trampled grass, the abandoned umbrellas, the lingering echo of fanatic voices. "This was no revival," she said, her voice low and sharp. "This was revenge disguised as politics." Tommy nodded grimly. "Then we'll treat it as revenge, and we'll make sure they regret involving us." "Meddling Beresfords," Tuppence muttered. "They haven't seen meddling yet." They turned toward the path leading out of the park, steps quickening, hearts heavy. Richmond Park settled back into its serenity, but the air still trembled with the residue of the gathering. Oaths whispered, loyalties fractured, and a woman stolen away under the guise of ideology. The stakes had risen, and the Beresfords were now walking straight toward them. The first thing Tuppence noticed when they reached their Chelsea flat was the envelope. It lay exactly in the centre of the doormat, neither pushed halfway through the letter slot nor dropped carelessly. It had been placed deliberately, as though the sender wanted to ensure they understood it was meant only for them. Tommy bent down. Not the postman's work. Postmen do not deliver existential dread, Tuppence replied dryly, not even on Fridays. Tommy picked it up, feeling the stiffness inside. Something rigid. Tuppence's voice softened into a whisper. Open it. He did. Inside lay a torn photograph, the other half of the image they had found in the Shoreditch factory. Honoré stood in the centre of the complete picture now, flanked by two men. One face they had seen partially. The other, now revealed fully, made Tuppence's breath stop. Reginald Vale. Even in an old photograph, his eyes carried that eerie charisma, cold brilliance wrapped in charm. His posture was relaxed, confident, as though the world had already agreed to submit. His hair was darker than in the mugshots, his expression controlled and unreadable. Shockingly, despite the decades, he looked nearly the same today. Tommy exhaled a low whistle. Well, that's him. Vale. Doesn't look 25 years older. Some men age like wine, Tuppence murmured. Others like mould. Vale appears to have chosen immortality. But the message, scrawled on the back, pulled their attention more sharply than the face. She lied about you too. Tommy read it aloud. Tuppence felt something tighten beneath her ribs. They're trying to destabilize us, undermine our trust in Honoré. Tommy studied the words. Or our trust in each other. She nodded. An old tactic, classic disinformation, fracture the allies before advancing. They stepped inside the flat, locking the door carefully behind them. Tuppence placed the photograph and envelope on the dining table. For a moment, they simply stared. Tommy broke the silence first. What do you think she lied about? Tuppence's brow furrowed. I don't know. But it doesn't matter, does it? Honoré may be difficult, secretive, maddening even, but not destructive toward us. And yet, Tommy said thoughtfully, there was much she never told anyone. Tuppence sat, smoothing her skirt with a restless motion. She was MI5's darling operative after all. Tommy joined her. Let's lay it out plainly. We know she infiltrated the torchbearers. We know Vale trusted her, or thought he did. We know she helped bring him down. And now he's loose again, Tuppence added, and hunting her. Tommy's voice lowered. And now we know Honoré was not just a spy. She was a double agent, before MI5 ever sanctioned her mission. Tuppence sighed. I suspected something like that. Honoré always had that guilt in her eyes. Not guilt toward us, toward herself. Tommy tilted his head. You're thinking of those months she disappeared during the war. Yes. Her eyes clouded. She told everyone she was convalescing, but she returned thinner, quieter, haunted. Tommy nodded. Tommy. She must have been living among them, the torchbearers. Earning their trust, Tuppence murmured, and betraying them. Tommy tapped the table, and through that betrayal she uncovered the location of their archive. Tuppence straightened. The ledger. The word felt heavy, a ledger full of names, supporters, donors, operatives, sleepers, people whose reputations or lives could be shattered. Vale wants it, Tommy said, to rebuild his power, or to destroy those who abandoned him. And Honoré knows where it is, Tuppence added. That's why they took her. The room felt suddenly smaller, as if the walls had drawn closer out of habit rather than intention. Tuppence rose and paced slowly. The message was designed to break us, designed to make us question her. But it failed, Tommy said simply. Yes, Tuppence agreed, stopping beside him. Because if Honoré did lie, she lied to protect us, or to protect something larger. Tommy reached for the coded pamphlet lying beside the earlier notes. Let's look at this again. Tuppence arched an eyebrow. Herrick already translated it. Yes, but he focused on the dates, not the structure. He held it up to the lamp, examining the uneven spacing, the peculiar breaks. After a moment, he smiled. Look at the third column. Every seventh symbol is slightly misaligned. Tuppence's eyes widened. A layered cipher. Yes. They wrote down the misaligned characters in sequence. Tuppence stared at the result. St. Brigid Holloway. A location, Tommy said. The next meeting place. or the place where she's being held. Or both, Tuppence said grimly. Holloway again, Tommy murmured. It was on Herrick's map too. Tuppence sank into a chair, arms crossed. An abandoned church, perfect for theatrics, perfect for a symbolic rebirth. She rubbed her temples. Vale always loved symbolism. He fancied himself a visionary. Tommy knelt beside her chair. We'll find Honoré. She looked at him with a mixture of affection and determination. I know we will, but we need to understand what Vale truly wants. Tommy leaned back, stretching thoughtfully. Let's assume he wants the ledger. What does it contain? Enough data to blackmail half a dozen officials? Enough nostalgia to stir new recruits? Yes, Tuppence said, but also something else. Truth. Their truth. Their shame. Tommy blinked. You think the ledger is his weakness too? Every leader's greatest weakness, Tuppence said softly, is the truth they fear others will uncover. They sat in reflective silence, the room filled only with the faint ticking of the mantel clock. After several minutes, Tommy said, Do you remember that interview Honoré gave in 1948? She said something curious. Some secrets don't fade, they simply wait for someone to carry them. Tuppence nodded slowly. Yes, she was talking about her double life, but also about unfinished business. Tommy tapped the envelope. And now that business has found her. Tuppence reached across the table, retrieving the two halves of the photograph and fitting them together. Vale's hand rested on Honoré's shoulder in the image, poised like ownership. Her voice shook. He thought she belonged to him. And she betrayed him, Tommy said. She betrayed his cause, Tuppence corrected. His arrogance simply made him take it personally. Tommy studied the photograph. The grey-coated man looks older than Vale, yet Vale seems unchanged. Some people thrive on venom, Tuppence murmured. They never lose their edge. Tommy rubbed his chin. Do you trust Herrick, fully? Yes, Tuppence said without hesitation. Tommy raised an eyebrow. She gave a small smile. I know that tone. You're thinking of his omissions earlier. He withholds easily, Tommy said carefully. He hesitated more than once. Yes, because the past embarrasses him. Tuppence shrugged. But he isn't malign, only ashamed. Tommy accepted that with a half nod. Fair enough. Tuppence stood abruptly. Tommy, bring out the wartime files. He retrieved their locked tin box from the hall cupboard. Inside lay a jumbled history, notes, coded scraps, intelligence fragments, photographs. Tuppence sifted through them with deft fingers. Here, she said, pulling out an old transcript of MI5 field reports. Honoré's movements, the torchbearer's patterns, Vale's rise. Tommy scanned pages with her. She lived with them nearly 6 months. Tuppence's expression softened painfully. She must have been terrified. Every day knowing discovery meant death. Yet she stayed, Tommy said. She always was braver than she believed, Tuppence murmured. Hours slipped by as they pieced together connections. Tuppence's deduction sharpened with each detail. Tommy, she said finally, we've been looking at the ledger the wrong way. Vale doesn't just want to use it. He wants to destroy anyone who turned against him. He wants vengeance, Tommy said. And resurrection, Tuppence added. Both at once. Tommy glanced at the deciphered address. So we go to Holloway. Yes, she replied, gathering the documents. Tonight we rest. Tomorrow we confront truth. She reached for her coat, then paused. For the first time, she said softly, I'm afraid we might be too late for Honoré. Tommy cupped her shoulders. We won't be. You can't promise that. I can, he insisted, because Honoré isn't a follower. She's a survivor. Tuppence met his gaze, gathering strength from it. Then we must survive with her. As they prepared for the next day's confrontation, Tuppence stood at the window, staring into the quiet London street below. Shadows stretched gently across the pavement. A cat wandered lazily between lampposts. To any other household it would be an ordinary evening. But for the Beresfords, it was the thin calm before history reached out with cold fingers. Tommy folded the photograph halves carefully. We'll take this with us. It might be needed. Tuppence nodded. Yes, pictures can speak when testimonies fail. As they headed for bed, Tuppence murmured one last thought to the silent room. The Pact believes its flame endures. Very well then, let us see how brightly it burns in the dark before dawn. And with that, they extinguished the lights, preparing to walk straight into Holloway's shadows, where the past waited, breathing. The first thing Tuppence noticed about St. Brigid's Church was the silence. Not the peaceful silence of a forgotten place, but the charged, unnatural quiet of a stage waiting for its actors. The derelict structure loomed at the end of a narrow Holloway lane, its once proud stone walls now strangled by thick ivy and weather-darkened vines. A single lantern flickered weakly near the entrance, lit recently, though the building itself had no electricity. Tommy peered upward. An abandoned church with active lighting. Lovely. Nothing ominous about that. Tuppence adjusted her coat collar. If the torchbearers wish to be subtle, they've missed their calling. The cracked stained-glass windows shimmered faintly under the lantern's glow, reds and blues fractured across the ground like broken promises. "Ready?" Tommy whispered. "No," Tuppence replied. "But go on." They slipped inside. The heavy wooden door groaned as if warning them to leave while they still could. Within, the air smelled of cold stone, wax, and something far older, anger, perhaps, or devotion left to rot. Tommy motioned for quiet. From deeper inside, voices murmured, low, rhythmic, almost ritualistic. The aisles stretched ahead in long shadows. Candles flickered from the nave, their thin flames trembling in the draught. Every footstep echoed too loudly. Tuppence leaned close. "Someone swept recently." Tommy looked at her. "How can you tell?" "The dust patterns," she murmured, "and the smell of fresh candles. They've prepared this place." "For tonight," Tommy whispered. They crept along the side aisle, keeping low behind broken pews. Through the space between wooden slats, Tuppence saw them, a congregation of masked followers standing in rows before the altar, black hoods, uniform posture, candles in their hands. Their faces were hidden, but their intent was written in the rigidity of their bodies. Tuppence felt a shiver crawl up her spine. "They look like an illustration from a Gothic cautionary tale." Tommy whispered, "Let's hope we aren't its final chapter." At the front of the group stood a lone figure, Honoré, bound at the wrists though cleverly disguised by a shawl draped around her arms. Her expression was resolute, even defiant, though her pallor betrayed exhaustion. Tuppence's nails dug into Tommy's sleeve. "We're getting her out." "We will," Tommy murmured, "but observe first. Find the leadership." Tuppence scanned the congregation and then saw him. Reginald Vale. He stepped forward with a calmness that felt more chilling than any raised voice could have been. His grey coat had been replaced by a long, dark garment resembling a ceremonial robe. His hair, still inexplicably dark for a man of his age, fell precisely into place, as though even time dared not disarrange him. His presence was magnetic. The congregation stilled instinctively. "Honoré St. Clair," he said, his voice rich as velvet and cold as steel. "The prodigal returns." Honoré lifted her chin. Not by choice. A ripple of disapproval moved through the crowd. Vale smiled. "Still unrepentant, I see. After all these years, still believing yourself the heroine." "I don't believe myself anything," Honoré said. "But I know a villain when I see one." Tuppence whispered, "Good for her." "Quiet," Tommy murmured. Vale continued, his tone soft but suffused with threat. "You will tell us where the ledger is." Honoré laughed, a brittle, tired sound. "Your obsession with that dusty book is pathetic." "It is not a book," Vale corrected. "It is the truth, our truth." "No," Honoré replied. "It is your noose." A murmur of anger hissed from the masked circle. Vale's eyes glittered. "The ledger includes more than our names. It includes the names of those who betrayed us, those who abandoned the rise we were destined for." "The rise you fantasized about," Honoré said. "Reality had other plans." A masked follower barked, "She must confess." Another snarled, "The oath must be restored." Tuppence squeezed Tommy's hand. "They're near breaking point." Tommy leaned close. "Then now's our moment to create a distraction." "Before they do something awful," Tuppence whispered. "Precisely." He pointed subtly upwards, to the old balcony running along the left-hand side. Its rail was rusted through, dangerously brittle. Tuppence caught his meaning instantly. "Tommy Beresford, you brilliant menace." He winked. "You just get Honoré ready to run." While Vale continued to pontificate about loyalty and resurrection, Tommy crept toward the stairwell leading to the balcony. Tuppence slinked to the opposite side of the church, inching closer to Honoré, concealed by broken pillars and forgotten hymn stands. Vale's voice grew harsher. "Honoré, you will reveal where you hid our ledger." "Never," she said. "Then the Pact shall decide your fate." Before the crowd could erupt further, a sudden crack resounded through the church. Tommy had kicked the balcony rail deliberately, knowing the rotted metal would give way. It collapsed spectacularly. Boards, dust, and rusted iron crashed down, sending masked followers scattering, shouting, shielding their heads. Candles toppled, shadows danced wildly. Chaos erupted. Vale spun toward the noise, eyes blazing. Tuppence acted. She leapt from behind a fallen pew and grabbed Honoré's arm. "Come on." Honoré jerked in surprise. "Tuppence. No time. Move." Tommy jumped from the last rung of the balcony stairs, landing beside them. "Reunion later. Exit now." The three sprinted down the right-hand aisle, pushing aside fallen hymnals and brushing past shrieking cultists. A pair of masked followers lunged for them, but Honoré kicked one firmly in the shin. "I still practice the moves you taught me," she said breathlessly. "Bless you," Tuppence whispered. They reached the side corridor, the narrow stone passage that led to the vestry and crypt entrance. But a figure blocked the way. Vale. He stepped into the corridor with unsettling composure, untouched by the chaos behind him. "Running so soon? We haven't even reached the confessional stage." Tommy moved protectively in front of Tuppence and Honoré. "Out of our way." Vale tilted his head. "Ah, the Beresfords, always meddling, always believing yourselves saviours." Tuppence stepped forward. "And you always monologue too long." Vale smirked. "Tell me, Mrs. Beresford, do you truly believe you can prevent what is already written?" "I believe," she said, "that you are compensating for a deep, embarrassing wound to your ego and dragging half-witted devotees with you." Honoré burst out laughing despite herself. Vale's eyes darkened. "The ledger," he hissed. "Tell me where it is." Honoré lifted her chin. "No." His voice dropped to a whisper. "Then I shall break you until you do." "Try," Tuppence said, stepping forward, "but you'll find we don't break as easily as your balcony." Vale lunged. Tommy tackled him, crashing them both into the wall. Tuppence seized Honoré's hand and pulled her into the crypt stairwell. "Run!" she cried. Honoré stumbled but followed. The crypt air was cold and damp, smelling of stone dust and centuries-old secrets. Shadows twisted in the lantern light as they raced down the narrow passageways. Behind them, Vale's furious shouts echoed. "They're heading to the crypt! Stop them!" Tommy caught up moments later, breathless. He fights like a man who practices glaring in the mirror. Tuppence huffed. "You married me. You knew what you were signing up for." Honoré laughed despite the circumstances. "You two haven't changed at all." They reached a small stone chamber where old reliquaries lay scattered. The walls were carved with saints whose faces had long eroded away. Vale appeared in the doorway, cornered. He stepped in slowly, predator sure. "Now, the ledger." Honoré met his gaze with steely calm. "You'll never hold it." "Where is it?" Vale demanded. Honoré's voice was steady. "Hidden somewhere you would never dare to look." Vale lifted a brow. "Is that so?" "In a children's charity library," Honoré said, "under my maiden name." For the first time, Vale's composure cracked. "A library?" he spat. "You hid our future among storybook shelves." Honoré smiled faintly. "Precisely why you'd never find it." His rage surged. He lunged. But before he could seize her, a sharp whistle pierced the air. "Police." Vale froze. More whistles followed, echoing down the stone corridors. Heavy footsteps pounded overhead. Voices barked orders. Vale's eyes darted between the Beresfords and the exit. "You tipped them off," he whispered. Honoré shook her head. "Someone else did," Tommy smirked. "Seems your followers aren't as loyal as you hoped." Vale backed toward the door. "This is not over." "No," Tuppence said. "But you are." Vale slipped into the shadows before the police burst through the crypt's side entrance. Officers surrounded the trio at once. One constable shone a torch. "Mr. and Mrs. Beresford, we received a call, anonymous tip, Said to come immediately. Something about extremists. Tuppence pointed upward. They're upstairs, or scattering. The leader fled that way. Search perimeter, an inspector barked. Tommy held Honoré steady as she swayed. Are you hurt? No, she whispered. Just exhausted. Tuppence pulled her close. We've got you now. Not yet, Honoré murmured. He'll keep coming until he finds that ledger. Then we'll get there first, Tommy said gently. We'll end this. Honoré nodded weakly, leaning into Tuppence. The three were escorted up the crypt stairs and out into the night, where police cars lined the lane. Vale was gone. The Pact was wounded, but not finished. And as they stood in the cold air outside St. Brigid's Church, Tuppence tightened her grip around Honoré's shoulders and murmured, The final confrontation hasn't begun, but it's coming, and we'll be ready. Honoré closed her eyes. Tommy exhaled, and the ancient church behind them whispered secrets into the dark, secrets that would decide everything in the chapters still to come. The moment Honoré stepped into the children's library, she paused, not out of sentimentality, but calculation. Her eyes swept the bright, cheerful space with clinical precision. Paper cut-out stars dangled from the ceiling, cheerful posters lined the walls, and the faint smell of glue and crayons lingered in the air. Tuppence whispered, It's hard to imagine international conspiracies in a room decorated with smiling dinosaurs. Honoré replied tersely, Which is why I chose it. Tommy closed the library door behind them. Let's make this quick. I'd rather not be ambushed by anyone in a grey coat, or anyone with ambitions in shadowy history-making. Honoré moved toward the far shelf, the one with pastel-painted wooden backing shaped like a storybook castle. She pressed her fingers along the side, counting grooves as though tapping out a melody she had memorized years ago. Tuppence watched with curiosity. You hid the ledger here all along? Not here, Honoré corrected. In this. She pressed a tiny carved star in the upper right corner. A soft click sounded. Then the entire backing panel slid outward like a small secret door. Inside, wrapped in brown cloth, was the ledger. A simple object. No gold leaf, no locked clasps. Just a thick, weathered book whose true danger lay in the ink inside it. Honoré hesitated a moment before lifting it from its hiding place. 25 years, she murmured. I thought I'd never see this again. I handed it over once during the war, she said quietly. Years later, when I realized how many hands it had passed through, I stole it back and hid it here. This time, I kept it where no one would ever think to look. Tommy stepped close. Let's look. Honoré nodded and carried the ledger to the long wooden reading table. The three gathered around, though Tuppence had to resist the urge to disinfect it first. Children's libraries were lovely, but notoriously sticky. Honoré opened the book. They inhaled together. Names. Dozens of them. Some familiar from the original torchbearers' arrests. Others shockingly current. Tuppence covered her mouth. Oh my word. Tommy leaned in. These are high-ranking officials, department heads, business leaders, diplomats. And financiers, Honoré added, pointing. Those who bankrolled rallies, printing presses, safe houses. Tuppence looked stunned. They infiltrated every pocket of the country. Yes, Honoré said softly. Even after their fall. Tommy flipped a page. But the most dangerous names, these weren't published in the trials, these were hidden. Honoré nodded grimly. The Pact believed they would one day rise again. These were their sleeping embers. Tuppence whispered, Vale doesn't want revival. He wants blackmail. Honoré's mouth tightened. He wants control. Through fear, through silence, through shame. Tommy closed the ledger gently. We must hand this over to the authorities. No, Honoré said sharply. We must first know who among the authorities is compromised. Tuppence felt a cold prick of understanding travel along her arms. Someone is leaking information to Vale, someone close, someone aware of our movements. Tommy's voice dropped. Herrick warned us. Herrick advised us. Herrick translated the cipher. And Herrick knew Honoré's past before we did, Tuppence added. He could predict her steps. They stared at one another, the truth forming like ice between them. Honoré's eyes widened slowly. It's Herrick! A lone footstep sounded behind them. They spun. Dr. Herrick stood in the doorway of the children's library. Gone was the gentle, affable historian they had dined with. His expression now was tense, hollowed, almost feverishly bright. He wore the polite smile of a man who had rehearsed it too often, and with decreasing sincerity. "My dear friends," he said quietly, "I was hoping you'd come to the correct conclusion. Saves me the trouble of pretending any longer." Tuppence straightened, her voice crisp. "Herrick, how long have you been following us?" He stepped inside, closing the door behind him with soft finality. "Since before Richmond, since before Shoreditch. In truth, since Vale's release." Tommy moved subtly, placing himself between Herrick and the ledger. "You helped free him?" Herrick tilted his head. "I facilitated circumstances, encouraged committees, influenced a few signatures. Nobody reads release documents as carefully as they should." Honoré looked sick. "Why, Herrick? Why would you aid that monster?" His face twisted. "Because during the war I was dismissed, underestimated. MI5 treated me as a footnote in their grand story. Vale, however, Vale understood. Vale promised influence, the chance to shape the narrative that Britain will remember." Tuppence's eyes flashed with fury. "So this was about ego?" Herrick's smile sharpened. "History is written by those bold enough to seize its pen," Tommy said coldly, "or by those foolish enough to think themselves authors." Herrick ignored him, stepping closer to the table. "The ledger, please." Tuppence folded her arms. "You'll not touch it." Herrick's cultivated charm thinned. "Tuppence, don't make this theatrical. That ledger contains names of powerful individuals, names that, if exposed, would destabilize the entire political structure. It must be managed properly." "Managed by whom?" Tuppence asked. "Vale." "By me," Herrick said simply. "Vale is a tool. Charismatic, yes, but controllable. I am the architect. Always have been." Honoré stood, shaking with equal parts rage and exhaustion. "You manipulated him. You fed him information. You orchestrated this horror." Herrick shrugged. "Ideologies are merely levers. People push them to move the world." Tommy stepped forward. "Herrick, you will not leave this room with that ledger." Herrick's smile dropped entirely. A brittle hatred glinted in his eyes. "Tommy, you and your wife have always been naive. Do you think I came here unprepared?" He reached into his coat. Honoré flinched. Tuppence stared defiantly. "If you pull out a weapon, Herrick, I swear I'll lecture you to death." Herrick blinked. "A weapon? Oh no, I merely brought this." He lifted a small vial of clear liquid. Tommy tensed. "Poison?" "Solvent," Herrick corrected. "Highly corrosive. A single drop will destroy ink instantly. 2 drops, an entire page. 5 drops, the ledger becomes a memory." Honoré gasped. "You want to erase history?" "I want to rewrite it," Herrick said. "Without this ledger, Vale's movement fizzles out. But I retain the knowledge of every name inside it. I hold the leverage." Tuppence spat. "You deranged little librarian." Herrick's eyes narrowed. "Give me the ledger." "No," Tuppence said. Herrick advanced another step. Tommy braced himself. Honoré reached subtly toward the table lamp beside her, a small brass thing shaped like a mouse reading a book. Tuppence saw the movement out of the corner of her eye. She needed to distract Herrick for one more moment. She began, in her brightest conversational voice, "Herrick, you do realize you're standing in a children's library. If you destroy that ledger here, the only historical narrative you'll control is the one about the eccentric historian who melted a book next to the adventures of Puddle Duck." Herrick blinked, just long enough. Honoré slammed her elbow into the lamp. It toppled. Sparks burst. The room plunged instantly into darkness. Herrick cursed loudly. Tommy lunged for him, but Herrick slipped aside and bolted toward the exit. In the pitch-black room, chairs toppled, books scattered, and the faint metallic sound of the vial clinked against something before vanishing into the dark. Tuppence scrambled to her feet. "Tommy? Honoré?" "I'm here," Tommy said, fumbling. "Where's Herrick?" Honoré pointed toward the dim outline of the doorway. "Gone." He ran. Tommy found the light switch, flicked it up. Only half the bulb sputtered back to life. It seemed the lamp mishap had compromised the wiring. Tuppence rubbed her temples. "Brilliant! Now he knows we have the ledger." Yes, Honoré said, and he will stop at nothing to destroy or reclaim it. Tommy exhaled slowly. Then the endgame has begun. Tuppence looked toward the door Herrick had vanished through, her eyes steely. He said, "The pact ends when I say it ends." Honoré's voice trembled slightly. "He believes he's shaping history." Tommy nodded grimly. "Then we'll shape it differently." Tuppence closed the ledger and lifted it against her chest. "Herrick wants to rewrite the past. Vale wants to revive it. But we end it," Tommy finished. Honoré took a deep breath. "Before he reaches Vale." "Before," Tuppence added, "he turns two dangerous men into a catastrophic alliance." They exchanged a single, unified look, equal parts fear, determination, and righteous stubbornness. The children's library, once filled with stories of adventure and courage, seemed to hold its breath as the trio prepared for the showdown fate had been edging them toward. And somewhere beyond the quiet shelves, Dr. Herrick slipped into the night, carrying with him the chilling certainty that history belonged to the one who controlled its secrets. He had every intention of winning, unless Tommy and Tuppence reached the final chapter first. "You." The first hint that their trap would work came when Honoré, peering through a crack in the Shoreditch factory wall, whispered, "They're here." Tommy exhaled slowly. "Both of them?" "Yes," she said, "and they aren't happy with each other." Tuppence adjusted the decoy ledger under her arm. "Good. Let's hope their mutual loathing outweighs their survival instincts." The derelict textile factory felt different tonight. No clandestine chalk messages, no scattered footprints, only the faint creak of beams overhead and the quiet precision of police officers hidden in the shadows, waiting. This time the Beresfords had come prepared. Tommy nodded to Honoré. "Ready?" Honoré's jaw tightened. "I've been ready for 25 years. They stepped into the open floor of the factory. Broken windows framed the dim lights outside, casting long, uneasy shadows across the concrete. Two figures faced each other in the centre of the room, Reginald Vale and Dr. Lionel Herrick. They looked like competing ghosts from an unfinished war. Vale spoke first, voice taut as wire. "You said you'd bring the ledger. I see nothing." Herrick's expression twisted. "And you said your movement would rise at my direction. Instead, you let it collapse into infighting." Vale sneered. "You interfered. You whispered from the shadows. You sabotaged what you pretended to lead." Herrick stepped closer. "I orchestrated everything. You were merely the face." "You deluded little archivist," Vale snarled. "The Pact followed me, not your timid academic posturing." Their tempers flared like two dry branches catching flame. Tuppence murmured, "If only we'd charged admission." Tommy stepped into the light. "Gentlemen, looking for this?" Both men whirled. Tuppence lifted the decoy ledger slightly, not enough to hand it over, but enough to ignite obsession in their eyes. Vale surged forward. "Give it to me." Herrick reached out a trembling hand. "No, give it to me. It must be destroyed." Tuppence stepped back. "I'm afraid that's impossible." Tommy added calmly, "Because this isn't the real ledger." Herrick froze. "What?" Tuppence smiled pleasantly. "A decoy, Herrick dear. You didn't think we'd bring the actual evidence to a meeting with two very determined criminals, did you?" Vale's voice cracked with fury. "Where is the real one?" "Already at the Home Office," Tommy said, "in safe hands, and soon to be in safe files." Herrick lunged toward Tuppence, wild desperation turning his movements clumsy. "Give it to me. You fools don't understand. If those names come out, the country will unravel." He was cut short by the sudden beam of torches igniting around the room. "Police!" shouted Inspector Marshall. "Nobody move!" Uniformed officers appeared from behind machinery and pillars. Vale tried to run, but two constables intercepted him with trained precision. Herrick staggered backward, eyes darting between the decoy and the officers closing in. "No," he whispered. "No, this isn't how it was meant to end." He bolted toward the side exit. Tuppence stepped into his path. She didn't shout, she didn't raise a hand. She only said, in a voice that struck like a quiet verdict, "History never needed you to rewrite it." Herrick faltered. For a moment, his old persona flickered. Lecturer, historian, man who wanted to matter. Then the fight went out of him. He sank to his knees as police seized him. Vale continued struggling until handcuffs silenced his ambitions. The Pact will survive, he spat. Tuppence replied dryly, not under your management. Honoré watched it all with a strange mixture of relief and sorrow. When the last of the conspirators were escorted out, she approached Tommy and Tuppence slowly, as though afraid the moment might dissolve if she moved too quickly. It's over, Tommy said gently. Honoré shook her head. No, not over, but ended. Tuppence placed a hand on her friend's shoulder. And you're free of them at last. Honoré's eyes shone. Thanks to both of you. Inspector Marshall approached. We'll need your statements tomorrow, but for tonight, go home, rest. You've earned it. Their flat felt warmer than usual when they returned, as though relieved to see them in one piece. Tommy lit the lamp in the sitting room. Tuppence switched on the kettle. Honoré sat gingerly on the sofa, as though reacquainting herself with safety. Tuppence prepared 3 cups of tea. Tommy accepted his with a weary smile. Quite a day. Honoré wrapped her hands around her cup as though absorbing its heat. I never thought the Pact would rise again. I never thought my past would claw back like this. Tuppence sat beside her. Old wars rarely vanish. They simply wait for moments of complacency. Honoré managed a quiet laugh. You always did have a poet's cynicism. Tommy raised his cup. To endings, and to cracked teacups that warn us in time. Tuppence nudged him. I told you, cracked teacups are never accidents. He smiled at her. No, my dear, not in our lives. Honoré breathed deeply, finally letting her shoulders relax. I suppose the ledger will be sealed away forever now. Tommy nodded. Where it belongs. And Herrick? She asked softly. Tuppence answered. History will record him appropriately. Footnote, not architect. Honoré stared into her tea. And Vale, Tommy's voice darkened. An echo fading. The country survived him once, it will survive him again. For a long moment, none of them spoke. The kettle clicked softly. Outside, a distant taxi engine hummed down the street. A stack of newspapers rustled faintly on the table, harmless tonight, for once free of coded messages. Tuppence leaned her head lightly against Tommy's shoulder. Do you think we'll ever have a quiet year? Tommy grinned. With you? Not a chance. Honoré exhaled a soft laugh. Thank goodness for that. The 3 sat together, letting the warmth and calm settle around them like a long-awaited blanket. The war of the Pact was over, the flame extinguished, the ledger safe. And for the first time in days, Tuppence allowed herself to feel peace. Old dangers might return some day, but tonight, they were home, fade out.